When I first met my fiancé's family, I knew the stakes were high. They were wealthy, influential, and notoriously discerning. Most people would have tried to impress them with designer clothes, expensive gifts, or rehearsed charm. I chose a different approach. I arrived looking modest, dressed simply, and spoke with humility, letting my mannerisms suggest naivety and lack of sophistication. They watched me carefully, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and quiet judgment. My fiancé tried to explain me, but I interrupted softly, deflecting compliments and brushing off insinuations of privilege. I acted unsure about which fork to use, complimented the simplest details excessively, and laughed a little too nervously at jokes I barely understood. I became the picture of a humble, somewhat naive young woman. Hey, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating. Thank you so much. Throughout the dinner, I observed them carefully. Their assumptions were clear. I was uneducated, inexperienced, and most importantly, harmless. They discussed investments, travels, and family legacies within earshot, thinking I wouldn't understand or remember. Every comment, every smirk, every glance was noted. I took mental notes, letting them settle into the comfortable illusion that they were in control. Even my fiancé was slightly concerned, whispering at one point, "Are you sure about acting so small?" I nodded, smiling faintly. I couldn't risk showing even a hint of the life I had quietly built for myself. He thought I was simply nervous. In reality, I was laying the groundwork for a revelation they would never see coming. By the end of the evening, they had made up their minds. They whispered to each other, subtly testing me with questions about money, education, and family. Each answer I gave, modest and humble, reinforced the perception of my naivety. They didn't suspect that behind every soft smile and nervous gesture was a woman who could navigate business, investments, and strategy far beyond their imagination. I left that night with their approval, or at least their tolerance, but also with the certainty that the real test had yet to come. They believed they had judged me correctly. They believed I fit the role they had cast me in. They had no idea how thoroughly I was preparing to upend their assumptions, because the truth they couldn't see yet was that appearances can be deceiving, and some people are far richer in skill, intellect, and strategy than anyone could imagine. Over the following weeks, I maintained the illusion with careful precision. I played the part of a modest, naive fiancé, letting my fiancé's family assume I was simple-minded, inexperienced, and completely dependent. Every social interaction was calculated, every word chosen to reinforce the image I had created. They discussed investments, stocks, businesses, and global ventures in my presence, completely unaware that I understood everything, remembered every detail, and had my own portfolio growing quietly in the background. I smiled, nodded, and feigned wonder at terms they assumed I wouldn't grasp. They made jokes about how I'd never manage a checkbook or never understand complex deals, laughing in their high chairs of assumed superiority. My heart beat with a quiet thrill. They had no idea that I already managed multiple streams of income, had properties under my name, and ran a small but profitable consulting firm, all without them ever knowing. The pinnacle of their arrogance came during a dinner when they casually discussed merging two of their minor businesses. I let the conversation flow, asking questions that seemed naive, but subtly nudged them to reveal their strategies and weaknesses. They boasted freely, analyzing risks, highlighting missed opportunities, and sharing projections, all of which I committed to memory. In that moment, it became clear they underestimated me completely. Meanwhile, my fiancé marveled at how I navigated the family, unaware of the extent of my pretense. "You're doing too much," he whispered once. I smiled, saying nothing. The more they underestimated me, the more I learned. Their assumptions were weapons I could use, and every careless word they uttered became intelligence I could leverage. I even let small hints of clumsiness or forgetfulness appear, misplacing a napkin, mispronouncing a term, laughing nervously at industry jargon. Each moment reinforced the story I wanted them to believe, that I was harmless, inexperienced, and unsuited for the sophisticated world they inhabited. They could not see past the veil of performance I had crafted. As the weeks turned into months, my control grew. I attended events they hosted, meetings they held, and dinners they orchestrated, always playing the same role. And behind the scenes, I quietly strengthened my empire. Investments, intellectual property, business negotiations, I handled them all remotely, building assets and connections that would someday shock them. By the time the engagement party arrived, I had quietly acquired several lucrative properties, launched a small but profitable tech venture, and positioned myself in networks that rivaled their influence. Everything they assumed I lacked, knowledge, strategy, ambition, was fully realized. And then came the day of the reveal, a casual comment at dinner, an innocuous invitation to discuss my portfolio, and suddenly the mask fell away. They stared at me as I explained calmly and confidently deals I had secured, assets I had accumulated, and ventures I had grown, all in the months they had underestimated me. The expressions on their faces were priceless. Shock, disbelief, and the dawning understanding that their assumptions had been entirely wrong. I had let them underestimate me for months, gathering the intelligence and power that would turn their judgments against them. They thought I was naive. They thought I was weak. But in truth, I had built a life far stronger than any of them could have imagined. And it was all because I had chosen to play the fool until the perfect moment to reveal the truth. The room went silent as I detailed contracts, properties, and investments they had never suspected I controlled. I smiled gently, letting the impact sink in. I had appeared small, harmless, and naive, but in reality, I had been unstoppable all along. Their perception of me had been shattered, and I realized, finally, that power lies not in appearances, but in the patience and precision with which it is wielded. The moment of revelation came at the engagement party. I casually mentioned a new investment venture I was leading, one that directly rivaled their smallest portfolio. Their jaws dropped, eyes widened. Whispers circled the room as they processed that the naive fiancé they had underestimated was, in fact, the one controlling deals they had never noticed. One of them stammered, trying to mask embarrassment, while another quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. I smiled politely, letting the silence speak louder than words. I didn't need to gloat. The astonishment in their expressions said it all. Every judgment, every condescending remark they had ever made had been based on a false assumption. My fiancé looked at me with a mixture of awe and disbelief, finally understanding the full extent of my subtle orchestration. I had revealed my intellect, my ambition, and my independence, not through confrontation, but by living it quietly, strategically, and without their knowledge.